This is our Standpipe Challenge webinar. We're going to be taping it. We have the panel members here today. I'm Mike Langford, and I'm with Toronto Fire Services. I've been 29 years. I've been on the high-rise unit for a couple of years and had to leave it. And I've been on an aerial ladder for a bit now too. I'm going to pass it on to the real host, Mark Vanderfeist, and he can introduce yourself, please, sir.
Thanks, Mike, and welcome everybody to our night tonight. Mark Vanderfeist. I work for a small department in Ontario. I can't name it, but it's a small department just in between London and Waterloo, and also begins with a W, just so you have to figure out. But I've been doing a firefighting job now for about 21, 22 years. Began down in the Pittsburgh area initially with Cranberry Township with our good buddy Dave Mack. And then I moved there to Mississauga Fire, where I worked there for a few years, and then jumped ship to where I am today as just a backseat firefighter. So welcome to our night tonight, and we'll hope to have some good discussion about standpipe challenges and high-rise challenges as it relates to our departments, both small and large, and of different models of operation as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. I'm going to pass it on to I have Brent Brooks in the next line.
Brooks, I do work for Toronto, but my views and opinions are myself, not the views of my department. I've been a firefighter now for 27 years, started with crash fire rescue at Pearson, then got hired on Toronto. I've been on the high-rise unit now for over 14 years, and I kind of run and organize anything that has to do with high-rise firefighting for the city of Toronto. I travel the world, going to Singapore in October, England again in September, and looking forward to it. Thank you.
Okay, now we go to Dave Connors. You're going to speak, might as well. All right.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, Dave Connors here. Sitting in tonight as a member of Firestar and the secretary of our Hogtown Fools chapter. I work for a career fire department in the GTA as well. In my 20th year, just a backseat firefighter. Many high rises in my first due run location. So enjoy tonight, and let's take in all the information we can take. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Dave. Right, next will be, I'll try to look right here. Dave Mack, welcome, say hi.
I am down in Pennsylvania. Mark mentioned Cranberry Township. Guess our highest structure about 6 stories. So that's high rise for me. We're a fast growing township. We're at about 32,000 population, 50,000 during the day when people are working, not right now. So, been with the fire company 20 years.
Very good. And you'll give us a perspective of how a fast growing community with some money is taking off and how you're going to have to deal with that. So thanks, Dave. All right. We'll go on to Mark Schmidt, please.
Hey guys. Yeah, I've been in the fire service 28 years. I'm still a member of my volunteer fire service. I work for a large urban fire service in Ontario. I can't share the name. They're kind of fussy about that, but I can certainly bring the perspective from that smaller volunteer service where we have an 8-story high-rise, if you will, to the city. So I'm pleased to be here, and I can't wait to see how tonight goes.
Thanks, Mark. We'll go on to Matt Bacca.
Hi, I'm Matt Bacca. I work for a career fire department in the East GTA. We're basically a medium-sized department with quite a few challenges in a lot of first due areas with different types of high-rise just because of age and variety, with a large number now popping up in our north end of our city as well. Been in the fire service 10 years on the back of a truck.
Very good. Thank you very much. And we'll go to Rob Wiggins.
Hi, Rob Wiggins, 13 years in the fire service. Combination between volunteer and career. Started out in a medium-sized GTA department. I'm now in a department that's middle-sized north of the GTA. I'm here as an instructor for Firestar Services in Hogtown Fools, and we have a lot of new high-rise popping up, and excited to be here.
Thanks, Robert. And we'll go, not finally, finally, to Matt Worley.
Hey guys, my name's Matt Worley. I'm a career firefighter with a mid-sized department in the Golden Horseshoe. We are growing at a remarkable rate right now. So we are definitely having some high-rise challenges as we work through it as a department. I've been a firefighter for about 20 years now. I've seen everything from the volunteer side of the service through to the career side. So I'm very happy to be here as a member of the Hogtown Fools. Thank you, Mike, for inviting me tonight.
No problem. Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for the introductions. I think we're a well-rounded group. We've got from a very large city down to some fast-developing smaller departments as well. Okay, so we set up a kind of a timeline for this, and what we're going to be doing is it was pretty, let's say, a little overwhelming, I think. So we've pared it down. We're going to probably end up doing 2 sessions on this. So the first session is suggested by our host, and Mark, I'd like you to be the host more. I'm going to be more of a moderator, if that's okay with you. All right. So as you can see, if everybody's got the what we're going to talk on, and I think it's probably, why not dive right into the hardest thing, all right, is the things that aren't easy to change, all right, in the high-rise environment, and actually firefighting itself. But, and we'll lead right into staffing, all right? Very hard to change because, again, staffing limits, and we'll start on that discussion, okay? Mark, if you want to lead.
Sure thing. So why is staffing an important factor for us to consider with the standpipe / high-rise operation for any department? And I would have to venture to say, because this is where the crux of the operation takes place, as far as the hands needed to perform the operations have to be, that must be done to fulfill the end goal. And no matter what size department we come from, whether it's the big size Toronto right down to a small size volunteer department, or a mid-size full-time or part-time / full-time department, the manpower situation is always going to be a tough battle for us to face. And we can't change that from our level because we don't have the resources to bring in more people as far as adding more manpower from a financial perspective. We can certainly make a call for other respondents to respond, like mutual aid or the units to come in from different departments. But as far as adding the extra staff that we have to make ourselves feasible in a high-rise response, we are limited, and we can't change that to a certain degree as far as hiring new people. That's where we can't change things. But we can change a few things, I think, from our perspective and from our position, in terms of how we may staff the initial call, how we may staff the initial assignments, how we may staff certain functions that have to be taken care of in the beginning or the onset of the actual operation. I think that's how we can have an effect on the change of our staffing models and staffing issues in that regard. One thing I'm going to lay out here as far as our discussion here is, one thing that was taught to me by Dave McGrail was, when you go to any kind of standpipe / high-rise call, you always want to bring that baseball bat to kill the fly mentality, meaning it's overkill to have a baseball bat to kill a fly. However, when you do have that baseball bat available, the job will get done, as opposed to bringing something less intrusive or less effective, and now you're kind of having to retreat, regroup, and then go back at it again. So in the staffing arena, we have to have that perspective with our viewpoint of, how do I bring the baseball bat to kill the fly in the case of a high-rise or standpipe operation? So how can we do that?
Okay, that brings up a very good point. And I like to say, I talk on a very basic, same principle, is why practice? People say it's only once in 100 years we get that fire. However, that fire could be at 101 years, okay? You could have 2 back-to-back. So we always should be practicing for our worst case scenario. So it's always automatic. It's not something that is reactionary. fire service has become reactionary. So why not practice and staff for the worst case scenario? All right. Pass it on to so who would like to speak next on that?
Sure, I could speak if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's fine.
So coming from a large department, it might sound easier to us that we have 83 stations, 3,000 firefighters. We can just keep throwing staff at it. Every time I've gone to a meeting or tried to make changes, or I pull up a code or a standard like NFPA 1710 or NIST or NIOSH, it's kind of fallen on deaf ears because it's not really related to the city of Toronto. So what I started doing was taking stats and statistics of the stations in Toronto, and now it has a little bit more validity to it. So watch the news, taking clips, taking stats, and then bringing that forward and say, this is what's happened in Toronto. This is, the Maydays that happened. These are the firefighter injuries, or this is how we've made a mess of the building. This is why our hose and nozzle package wasn't effective at the time, and using our department city as a for new stats and statistics, because everyone can get stats and statistics offline, but I needed to bring it a little bit more close and personal to home, and been successful doing that.
Okay, Mark, you're up. Talk on your department.
Me?
Yeah, you came up.
We're fairly similar to you guys. I mean, we don't have 83 stations. We have a third of that, and the staffing on the trucks is really good. Our district chiefs are really good at upgrading the calls as soon as we know we have something working. So, I mean, from a staffing perspective, where we are, it's pretty good. You can always use a few more bodies at a high rise for sure. But staffing wise, it is like Mark said, and Brent to a certain extent, it is a tough thing, and you have a very difficult time changing it in your own department. So for us, it changed, I'm going to say a little bit over 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago, just as I was getting on. They started adding some additional trucks to those high-rise calls, and it has made a difference. Certainly banging that second alarm out as soon as you can is going to help things out, at least from her perspective.
Very good. Matt Worley.
Yeah, we find a really big challenge. We're, that mid-level department that honestly we don't rely on help from outside enough, so that when we get those high-rise calls, we find that we're just not having the staffing that we need to get the job done. We've been fairly thankful that we haven't had anything really major, anything get out of control on us. Is it a waiting game? Probably. We just don't have the staffing levels that we need on shift on a daily basis to get us those numbers on scene.
Okay. How about, sorry?
If I can there, Mike, in addition to that staffing, it's great to get bodies to the call, but to get them from the truck to the floor is another story too. And sometimes not even just the building that's causing us that problem or the fire that's causing us that problem. It's the incident commanders that are not pushing the trucks to get up below the fire so that they can be in a place to really help out. It's probably one of the biggest things. I still see a lot of like second due trucks taking lobby, and it's just kind of silly in my mind. We should be going up.
Yeah, well, we'll talk on that a bit more, because that does bring up a very good point on how we use our resources. Oh, there's Dave Mack. How about what's going on in your world? Standpipe operations.
So for us, again, you talk about that 100-year call. So we're waiting for that call. So to cover that, we developed in the last couple of years a SAFER group, standard actions for emergency response. So if I get a call right now for a possible structure fire or a fire in a hotel, we simultaneously dispatch the 5 base companies and then 2 out of counties. So we have 7 fire companies responding to a call to have the manpower, because we're finding that it's easier to cancel than it is to get on scene and go, we got the call, the big one, and now we need help. So now you're hitting your second, third alarm. We have them on the initial dispatch.
Okay, that brings up a good point, and we'll talk on that a bit more too, about the initial response. Okay. Rob Wiggins, you can come up, man.
Yeah, so our biggest thing, both departments that I've been on are roughly the same size. Initial response is going to be the same. The biggest difference is the current one, our second alarm would be our entire department. So in all surrounding agencies are volunteer, or it's a small full-time department that doesn't have high-rise capabilities yet, or even maybe an understanding of what that would be like as a second kind of alarm response. So I think for us, it's going in with 320 liters a minute if we are that limited on manpower, versus bringing in that 1,000 liters. And like you said, baseball batting it. That's, I think, the biggest thing that we're dealing with is, are we going to get to that point where we're going to have that bucket of water for a cigarette butt, specifically for that 100-year wind-driven fire where we're going to be chasing our tails, and then the effects of it going through the entire building versus going in with that kind of heavy weapon.
Okay. All right. Matt, back.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay.
Comparable size.
So, yeah, we're in the same boat as Rob and Matt there. Medium-sized department, initial response. We're lucky if it's under 7 floors. We do get four trucks in the command vehicle. If a second alarm is raised by the standard, like unfortunately we're like Rob, it depletes our resources. We are semi-fortunate. We are between one side of us is career, the other side of us is composite. So far, same thing. In my time here, we haven't had the Holy Grail fire yet. They've had them in the past, but everything has worked out well. We've been fortunate in some ways to make small steps and changes, and they're still pushing. But same with Matt and Rob, we're kind of in the same point where we're not big, we're not small, we're just fighting that middle ground right now.
Yeah. What are you looking at for actual staffing numbers, Matt, on scene? Where I come from, we're the 26, 28, 30, depending on the staffing of the day.
So our bare minimum is 33 guys. So one would be a platoon chief, and then we have 8 staff trucks, all with 4 people, 4 personnel. Okay. So at our bare minimum, it gives us 8 trucks to work with, plus a command vehicle. Same with daytime, we do have the option of calling in a training officer or officers, sorry, plural, to assist in some things that are needed on scene.
Okay, so just to clarify, and this is where we get into a discussion too, is initial response to automatic alarms as opposed to what you're going to have on a fire call when you arrive and you do have a working fire. Initial response to me is that, again, being proactive as to reactive. So what do we got coming in? We're actually, being a big department, Toronto, we are looking at getting more people on the initial automatic alarms. However, we don't. We're still small, really, when you think about it. Do you agree, Brent?
Yeah, it's funny because coming from a crash fire rescue background, they send the exact same response. They send at Pearson, they send a full response for a 767 as they do for a Cessna 172. Cessna 172 holds 2 passengers. 747 had 600 passengers. They're getting the same response in case shit hits the fan type thing. And we should be doing that for these high-rise buildings because we don't have a second chance. Once you've made a mess of the building, it's too late to recover. You need to have the firefighters already on scene to make things happen quicker.
Again.
In a small department, like let's say where I am, as well as say the Miltons, who are small, developing, I can say for our perspective, our worst day is only 8 people arriving on scene for both the initial call for, say, an automatic alarm, as well as a confirmed fire in a high-rise situation. Only 8 would be the worst case scenario. That'd be the worst day, which is more prevalent than, say, our best day, which would be all 12 individuals arriving for both the initial and for a confirmed structure fire within a high-rise. So between 12 and 8 is that parameter that you're playing with, which is where we have to prepare for the worst, as you were saying, Mike, which is going to be 8. Prepare for the worst, hope for the best. And so that baseball bat mentality plays a more important role with only 8 people than it does, say, with 83 people that are coming on scene or 24 or 16 that are arriving on scene there. But still, you have to have that, I think, the spectacles of progression. You want to have that baseball bat, regardless of it's Toronto or Markham or Mississauga or Oakville or Burlington or the other big GTA departments. We have to have that same mentality because the product we're dealing with, which is your fuel loads, your high heat release rates, the access into the building, your water supplies, your problems of maybe it's a bad day for the pump operator, the truck's not working properly, you got standpipe clogs or blockages within the system, you have maybe PRVs or other things like that are not set right now, working properly. All that is still going to be present in the big city versus a small city. And so that baseball bat mentality must be, I think, at the forefront all the time to help us staff the initial call, the confirmed structure fire call, staff the proper functions that have to be done. So like Mark was saying, there might be a second truck arriving, still taking lobby sector. When we got to get that manpower up to get the line in place to start creating and maintaining defendable spaces with water being applied now ASAP, to take that baseball bat and to kill that fly right away, like a one-time knockout punch, as opposed to fooling around with other parameters that will waste time, let things grow, let things get bigger. And in the long run, now we're one time to having to retreat, regroup, and then go back at with a much bigger problem to face than initially when we're there in the first place. So, like you say, Mike, prepare for the worst, which is in my case only 8 people, but hope for the best.
Okay. And then obviously we'll come into that too in a little bit about how 8 people handle the big baseball bat kind of response. As for the other departments that we've been talking about, and yes, you haven't had that catastrophic event yet, but it will happen. And unfortunately, we have done well with ours. We've been very reactive, but in the end, we can throw more manpower at it, and or staffing, and we've been lucky that way. However, for the mid to smaller departments, you're going to get overwhelmed very quickly. All right, and it's amazing how quickly it does compound, we'll call it. All right. Anyway, we'll go back to talk to. Go ahead.
Yes. Like I said, I feel that the department I'm from, we don't have a big enough bat yet. We're always working towards that. I think it's a combination of manpower and how well we use that manpower, like Mark Schmidt talked about. It's not always just about getting people on scene. It's getting people on scene and getting them to the right places in the building. I think, Mark, you made reference to second truck coming in and grabbing lobby. Do you want to talk a little more about that?
I mean, you guys nailed a couple things with the big baseball bat. Like, yeah, we can send a bunch of people to it, but we're still not bringing a baseball bat to fight the fire, which is part of the problem. But yeah, our big thing is whether it's alarm bells or high rise, the second truck's supposed to grab lobby, and that's great. We can start to control the building, but the real problem is fire upstairs, and we're not sending enough people to go and investigate it, look at all our tactical priorities that we need to look at when it comes to controlling that fire, controlling the building, controlling the people within it. And it's a bit of an old school, change the fire service culture a little bit when it comes to it. And trust me, when I got hired, the department I'm in 11 years ago, I had no idea what high rise really was. It wasn't until I kind of started hanging out with some people like Dave McGrail that you were talking about earlier, that you start to learn, man, we're not even looking at this animal in the right way. We're not even trying to pump the building the right way. I think the whole purpose of tonight is those big steps that need to be taken, and we have big steps ahead of us, at least from my perspective.
That's right. And what we've learned in past practice, and Brent can talk a bit about it too, is the few that we've had where we are mandated the second truck is technically supposed to be taking the lobby. We can bypass if we necessary, but the third truck has to, technically. What we have found is that we have our occupants, we've lost occupants in the smoke, and because we concentrate on these things and the IMS, the management system, that maybe we should be getting people to those locations quicker above the floor and stuff like that. So yes, that's what our thing. Brent can talk a bit about that too, if you want.
Yeah, I think with us moving forward, we're not doing it to date. I don't know, did that thing just show up on the screen or no?
I haven't seen it, no.
Okay, I thought I could share it on the screen, but I kind of had the new way that we're heading, and basically we're getting 3 crews up to the fire floor, and then the 4th and possibly 5th truck will be taking lobby. That way we get 600 feet of hose. We have all sorts of nozzles, all sorts of increasers, door control, and we're going to be doing positive pressure isolation along with fire attack, and that'll help us preventing a mess of the building. And everyone's going to be assigned a specific task regardless of what type of building it is, and things are going to happen a lot more quicker, but we have to be disciplined in doing that. So it's going to be a big change for us, but it's going to happen sooner than later. Looking forward to what's going on. And I think it's a model that other departments can use regardless on the staffing levels.
So Brent, you mentioned you have 3 crews initially going up. How many guys in total is that?
Let's see if I guess it's not.
That would be 3, 3, 6, and 3 is 9. No, probably 8.
Yeah, so we could get, is that showing yet there? No.
Nope.
No.
The screen sharing? Oh, that's too bad. Okay, so we're going to get 3 firefighters that get off the truck first, and they're going to obviously take lobby control, elevators on phase 2, and they're going to start the process. There was talk that we were going to wait. We're going to wait for more trucks to arrive on scene. We're going to wait for this, wait for that. But in reality, if you look at, we've been timing everything. How long does it take to go to the CACF room? How long does it take to get the elevators on phase 2? How long does it take to go 2 floors below the fire floor? How long does it take to take the stairs up? How long does it take to locate the fire? How long does it take to pick the correct standpipe or stairwell? We've been timing that, and you're up to 16, 20 minutes sometimes. So the cavalry is coming, but you can set the stage for all the firefighters coming in behind you, and by recording those times, keeping track of it, we've been able to make the progression. So we're getting 3 firefighters off the get-go. 2 are going to be investigating. The other one is going to be lobby control. So you're getting 2 firefighters that are going to locate the fire. Your next in crews are coming up, and they're going to be a crew of 3. They're going to bring the exact same equipment, the exact same kit. So they're bringing 150 feet of hose as well. So now you got 300 feet of hose up on the fire floor with only 2 crews. The next in crew is another crew of 3 or possibly 4, and they're going to bring up another 3 lengths. So we're already at 450 feet of hose. So we can start meeting the NFPA with 2 lines on the fire floor, and we can even start a line above the fire floor. So that is kind of a big deal, because most departments will have around 8 to 9 firefighters.
Yeah, so that's the gold standard that we're looking for, as our friend Dennis Laguerre would say. However, that's a lot of equipment, a lot of manpower, and as opposed, we may have 8 if I think. Again, I'm talking about 3 on each pumper engine, so that's 2 of those, and then we generally have an aerial crew, which is 2, because we generally staff it with 3. So 1 will be the operator. So ultimately, we get 8.
And firefighters are going to start wearing more hats. So you're going to have, when you first arrive on scene, you're the incident commander, you're the lobby control, you're wearing a bunch of hats. And then as the fire progresses, you're going to start losing your hats until you only have one task, until all the second alarm assignments get there.
I want to say there, after Brad was talking, was that the biggest city in our country only has people going up on the initial assignment. So if the biggest city only has 8 people, what about the smaller cities? And this is why I'm talking about the perspective of the baseball bat to kill the fly. If the biggest city can only have 8 guys initially arriving on scene, with others still coming, as far as that cavalry coming to assist, they're bringing a lot of equipment, hose, to help meet the golden standard, as we mentioned already. And yet a lot of departments that are smaller in size that look to the big city, such as Toronto, for example, as the example, are still want to shy away from bringing the big guns, in essence, to fight this fire. Want to shy away from having an overload of manpower when we need it. And so if the big city is only getting or only getting 8 people and they're bringing the big guns, then the same thing should be passed down to the smaller cities that who are arriving with 4 or 6 in the initial assignment, initial arrival of the call, that they got to bring the big guns too, because now they're working with less hands than the bigger city is or the biggest city is. And I would draw everybody's attention to good information that we can glean from is that study that was done by NIST back in 2013 down in Washington, D.C., where they had done some experiments. It's called the Report on High-Rise Fireground Field Experiments, and it looked at 3, 4, 5, and 6 person crew deployments doing different functions such as rescue, advancing in the attack line, hook up a second attack line, doing a search, and looking at those different functions completed by the 3-man crew, the 4-man crew, the 5 and the 6-man crew, and the difference in time between those numbers. And when you look at the worst case being only 3 people on any team that's asked to do the initial attack line, hook it up, stretch it, start fighting fire, or start doing a search, or get the second attack line in place, versus say a 6-person team or a 5 or a 4, the time it takes to do that increases exponentially when you have fewer manpower or fewer hands to do the actual job. So if we had a magic wand, if we all had a magic wand we could wave and say, well, abracadabra, I wish we had 6-person crews on every piece of apparatus arriving on scene, and that will give us 12 to 18 people arriving on scene first to do important functions like secure the water source, start doing search. We have a lot of hands to get that job done, and the clock will stop quicker when we have those things in place versus reality, which is we only have maybe 3 people arriving on scene first, or 2 worst case, or 4, and then later on as more manpower arrives, we have the resources. But initially we don't have enough hands to get those things in place, to get what needs to be done to help us meet the objectives of life safety, which is the paramount thing for us to try and meet and to get completed. And so the time it takes for us to do those tasks, such as water, search, removal, with only a 3-person crew or 2-person team, which is the reality for a lot of small departments, the time is going to increase exponentially every time for us to complete that task. And as Brent mentioned, the building is already getting wrecked. It's already getting dirty. We have equipment there for us to start stretching out and start getting things done. So why not overload it with as much as we possibly can initially, as opposed to we'll just send 2 or 3 or 4, and then if we do need more, we'll bring them in at that point in time later on. So I guess the main point I'm trying to make here is cities who are run by administrators, they're not run by firefighters, they're run by administrators. Some used to be a firefighter, but as they've kind of gone on through their career, have kind of forgotten the firefighting aspect of what it takes to be working on the front line with your hands on the actual hose. They're the ones that are dictating what we're going to go to that call with, what we're going to use as far as equipment and manpower to take care of that call. And unfortunately, their dictation to us is always going to be, it seems to be the minimal, which is going to be your 3-person teams, your 2-person teams, the smaller size hose lines, the minimal equipment, everything is minimum, because they're looking at it from a different perspective of the risk management or financial loss or financial impact it may have on the building itself property conservation? What's this department's liability look like as far as us engaging in this practice of being maybe more aggressive as opposed to being less aggressive? And in the long run, what it all leads down the road to is it's going to lead down the road to a bad outcome for one of two people. And the outcome can be either A, the occupant or occupants who are trying to help and get out, or two, the ones trying to do the work to get the occupants out. That's a bad outcome for us. And when you look at that outcome has to be changed somehow. And staffing is the biggest catalyst that can either make the outcome good or the outcome bad in the long run.
I agree wholeheartedly on that. And there are some avenues, and we'll talk about that in a bit, that we might be able to pursue and get. But also on that is not just the administration. We do get a lot of pushback from the members as well. They, through not practicing or training, and it's new, a new skill set's a little hard for them. And I think we've all witnessed it, the pushback from our crews on. They say it's difficult, but in the end, once you practice it enough, it isn't. And you're going to get that big baseball bat up there with probably 4 people. Like, I think you can get 4 people up there with it without any issues. 3 people even can get the setup as far as the way we practiced it. Dave Connors, I haven't heard from you yet. What do you think?
Oh, I didn't know I was speaking tonight.
I wanted to. Look at you.
That's okay. No, my department, not a lot different than what's going on. We're on a good day, depending on staffing levels, we might be 21, 22 arriving. They've just started adding a 4th pump to our confirmed structure fire calls now, whether it's residential or a high rise. I just actually ran a fire in a high-rise apartment not 2 weeks ago, and we had 4 pumps, a ladder, rescue, and platoon chief on that call. I heard some discussions about what the first and second do trucks in, what they do. It was our area, we were first due, our job. 3 of us would make the fire floor, eventually doing the stop to below, all that stuff. Our driver then becomes the elevator operator. And then the second due pump, they're responsible for getting water to us, catching the standpipe, all that fun stuff. Third due pump would assist the second due in, and then would start stretching any additional lines, making the fire floor as well, and potentially pressurizing stairwells, that sort of deal. We seem to be stuck on sticking our rescue guys on lobby control. For whatever reason, our rescues do run minimum 2 at times. They're also carry our RIT equipment. So we are handcuffed that way as who do we assign to RIT, who's backup. We already know, we have down pretty good that first due in is gonna go to work. And then from there, I mean, it has to be orchestrated the best it can. Now we do have a few more trucks we could draw from if it got big. But working with what you have and the platoon chief having to orchestrate that would be paramount. Everybody understands all the jobs need to be covered. It's just figuring out who's going to do that and get it done efficiently, for sure. It's tricky.
It comes back to what Mark was saying about, and Brent, that people are going to be starting to wear many hats. I'm not a big believer in that. I still like seat assignment and knowing exactly what your job is going to be when you do get a high-rise operation. So that way it might be able to concentrate limited staff on what their job is. You have anything to say to that, Matt Baca?
No, I'm in agreement. I like the seat assignment thing. We run a very similar setup to what Dave and Matt do. Like, our first in truck is fire attack and rescue. Our second due is lobby control. Third truck in usually assumes assisted on the fire floor or whatever they're assigned. Our 4th truck is designated RIT. About a year ago, what happened is we did start sending 4 trucks now to confirm fires. We're fortunate that way. Most of our platoon chiefs will request the rescue right off the bat. So we'll have a 5th truck that's more of staging and or waiting for an assignment. I heard you guys talk about bringing the big guns all the time, one thing. The biggest thing we found here with change is that as much as we want to be proactive and bring it all at once, trying to make change has been better with progressive. So prime example, about 1.5 years ago, we started with the high-rise pack. We used to have the PAL packs, which were a great design for covered space and stuff like that. Ergonomically, terrible to carry up flights of stairs. So we started there with converting to the Denver pack. It kind of went across the board slowly as all different firefighters got to experience it. They liked it, better to carry, better on their backs, whatever. From there, it's progressed now to the nozzle tips. So now slowly we'll be transitioning into straight bore nozzles. So we found by not trying to overload everybody with everything we want to do as much as we want to make change fast, kind of progressively stepping into it and allowing people to have somewhat of an input has had a bigger impact than just coming out and saying, you know what, we're going to 2.5 and this is what we're going to do. We've kind of let the crews play with it, get some feedback, and then kind of implement the things that need to change forward with the help of training, obviously all the other people above.
That's 45 millimeter or large hose?
So right now it's 45 millimeter. Did see in the training minutes, they are looking at larger hose now, but same thing, it's been progressed where people have bought into the Denver pack with 45. They've bought into the straight bore nozzles now, so they're coming. So the next progression is to buy into that 2 or 2.5 inch line to get that volume on the fire floor.
Thank you. All right, Rob Williams.
Yeah, so a couple things. We're in the similar boat. We're using the PAL packs right now. Very similar on both departments where I was and where I am. We are running a split hose bag, so we're running that 2.5 as our supply off the pipe, going down to 1 3/4 inches. So we're almost halfway there mentally on the hose. I think the biggest challenge for a department like ours, and maybe some others, is going to be breaking that experience of the 2.5 in the parking lot, dragging it across that pavement with a fog nozzle, ripping pressure, and that's what everyone's expecting. Versus when we get into the lightweight proper hose, the deployment, like Baca said, those PAL bags are brutal. It's over 40 pounds with your components on one shoulder versus splitting the equipment. So for us, we are a crew of 4 on the first due, possibly a crew of 3 depending on which truck responds, but typically let's say a crew of 4. Our first pump operator secures water, so we're going up with 3, one of which is maintaining elevators. So we're actually having to deploy with 2, one being the officer. So we are going to have that, where I really like the model of what Worley was talking about, where that second due apparatus bumps up the water source and that first due just passes in place. In the smaller departments, I think it's even easier to deploy that because you're able to know your second due response area a little bit better, and locate those FDC connections and all that isn't going to be as difficult in a smaller department where you're familiar with going to that same building over and over. So that's kind of all I've got on that point.
Very good.
It's true, because that's the way we've been taught, but finally the science has finally caught up to the fire service where now we can add science to our tactics. And I think where firefighting in general has stalled because of the science, but now that the science is here, I think it's going to be quicker and easier for other departments, and including ours, to change to a more effective firefighting tactics.
Mm-hmm. I like that, Brent, and I think that science is driving our techniques, right? If you look at some of the stuff that Mark Schmidt was teaching last year at the Canadian High Rise Conference, he was doing that minimum staffing. We're still driving that 2.5, and we're driving that 2.5 down a hallway, and we're doing it effectively, right? That's the kind of thing we got to get into. The science is there. It shows us what we need. Now, let's build on technique to get there.
I believe that 100% technique. I spent the last week and a bit teaching our recruits on how to move the 65 millimeter hose.
Mm-hmm.
First, I started off with a 100 length, 100 feet, and then try to pull that. You can't. Yeah, even with 2, it's really hard. Then you loop it back on itself. One person can pull it easy peasy. So it's all about technique, and then we've got to just shatter that thing that we were talking about, how that heavy hose and how we used to charge it to 900 kPa, and it was like pushing a rod. All right, that's not the way it is anymore. And so again, this is where this hopefully will broaden, and people will start to think about it anyway. Yeah, again, attaching the smoothbore to the package is probably the golden standard that we're all looking for. And I can't believe we can't get anything out of Loyalist. I've talked to the training officer on a few occasions. They're still really hard to find any information on how that line clogged, and that should be like a no-brainer. We should all be looking at that as being our test case as why smoothbore interior, especially a high-rise standpipe operation, is important. And then that also plays back to how making it easy to move that 65 millimeter hose with that less pressure and less nozzle reaction. Anyway, we'll go back to Mark, and you can carry on, Mark Vanderfeist.
Looks like we're kind of diving off in some little rabbit trails with hose size and nozzle, which is good stuff, which is more so for our next section on what we can change with equipment. But getting back to staffing, the one question I think we have to answer, all of us collectively, is what is recommended for us to have staffing? What are the experts, if you want to call them that, the experts saying we need to have when we go to a high-rise standpipe kind of situation? So what do we know? If we go around the panel and ask them, what do you guys think is recommended for us to have as far as manpower on scene to do a high-rise standpipe kind of call? Is it 3? Is it 8? Is it 6? Is it 4 for the initial team? What are some thoughts you guys have as far as what do you know? What's recommended?
For staffing.
For staffing.
Mm-hmm.
Just from the stuff that I've been at, you know, if you take a look at like the Denver model, which I kind of think they're very similar to the department I work in, they're sending 48 to that first alarm fire. And it seems crazy, but when you see their layout for it, it's like, that makes a lot of sense. Does that work everywhere? Obviously not, right? It's not going to work for the mid-sized fire departments or the smaller ones like Mark Vanderfeist is in. It's what works for you, right? It's finding that staffing that works for you.
Anybody else?
Here's Brent throwing up a schematic.
Did that work there?
Yeah.
So this is something that we're working on with the deployment group. And if you look at the alarm location, no one's there yet, obviously, and it's just an alarm location. The first in truck is going in with 3, and they're getting off at staging, and then they're sending the elevator control firefighter back down. So they're really going up to the fire floor just with the 2 firefighters. Now they get up there, they locate the fire. Now the captain becomes task oriented, so he's got to transfer command, but he's not technically waiting because he's located the fire. Now he's got to estimate his stretch. He's got to do positive pressure isolation. There's a lot of things that captain and crew members are going to be doing to set the stage. While they're setting the stage, the elevator control is starting to bring more firefighters up. They're still setting the stage. They're looking for area refuge. They're hooking up to the 65. They're stretching a dry line. They're setting their door strap. There's so much stuff that they can be doing to set that stage. Going forward, setting the pressure gauge, flowing the water, the drivers hooking up to the FTC connection, the backup crews are coming in. They're coming forward. They're bringing the lines. What we've done on this committee was we've taken everyone's attribute or designation away from them. So if you're a squad, even if the high-rise unit or an aerial, you're just a firefighter, and these are the tasks that need to be done in this particular order. And we found that we can do less with more by setting the stage quicker and just having firefighters not wait, but just start dotting their I's and crossing their T's type thing. but we're going in every time in the future with 5 firefighters minimum. And we can do that within 16 minutes.
Okay. Again, we'll have to disagree on that one. I'm not a fan of everybody's jack of all trades. What I have found, and I've been an IMS follower and developer for a lot of years, and the best model has always been if I have somebody assigned to a certain task. So I'm of the old school where 2 pumps or engines, they would be the attack group, and the truck crew and the rescue crew would become the search above and the top floor search. To me, those are the positions that have to be filled, specifically the ones that are in the top of the stairwells. Those have to be, and we've witnessed it, and we don't want to go down that path ever again. We need to get people to the top of those stairwells, because the sheep will go up the stairwells. All right, that's where we're going to find occupants. Okay.
I should have clarified myself. So what we're doing is the first response. So let's say the squad shows up first. Are they going to be doing, elevators? Are they going to be doing squad stuff? No, they're going to be fire attack and locating the fire. It's the response after that where all the tasks are specific. The squads are going to be on the elevator or doing rescue. The rescues are going to be doing rescue work. The IRITs, the RIT teams, the trucks, the ladders, the platforms, they're doing task specific. It's the initial response that might lose the designation just to fill those spots, to get 5 firefighters going in the front door together. That's what we're playing with. It's certainly not set in stone, but we're running scenarios to try and throw a wrench into it so it doesn't happen out on the street.
Mm-hmm.
So question, Brent, what is the initial response in that model? Like, if it came out today with that model, what are you initially sending?
Let's see if I have it here, just fresh in my mind.
Well, just off the top of my head, our past practice has been the engine crew will be in there first. We're lucky where we are, Brent and myself, is that I have the second due and third due within generally, well, my hall especially. I've got all 3 trucks there at the same time. So
yeah. So my question here though is like, we're sending 3 pumps, an aerial, and a command vehicle to our initial alarm. In this model, what is the initial the amount of trucks that you're getting or possible manpower?
We're getting 5.
So you're getting 5 trucks. Okay.
5 vehicles, yeah.
Yeah, so we're 2 pumps, 1 aerial for a fire alarm. We up it by 1 pump if it's a confirmed fire. But what I do like is that what the big city of Canada is going in with as first in crew on the fire floor is what we're operating with. So to take your model and your staffing, obviously we don't have the next in multiple units, but that first initial staffing is doable from a department of a small to medium size.
Right. And your SOPs and SOPs might be, or Gs might be different than us. Like you might say, you know what, we can't afford to take the elevator, because if we lose elevator control, we could lose half our department right off the get-go. So you may have to, your SOPs and SOGs might be different, but I think at the end of the day, if you can at least start something with 5 on the fire floor, with certainly more coming, because with Toronto now, when we go to the second, we're getting 51 firefighters on scene. So we actually beat the NFPA 1710, but we're also calling that second alarm earlier. If it is any type of smoke, it gets bumped up to a second, so we have crews rolling.
it becomes a logistical nightmare sometimes too, though. But
It is, yeah.
anyhow, yeah. So again, back to what Mark was saying, and what we originally what we're looking for is how you respond and with how you use your resources, I guess. And so that will actually ultimately give you your number for that initial response, and then it will build on it from there. And as Brent had said,
sorry, I'm going back to that whole baseball thing, bringing a bat to kill a fly. Could you imagine if the batter went up there and it's live TV, He realizes he doesn't have the right size back, and now he has to walk back to the dugout and get his bat. Is he going to get a delay of game? Most likely, right?
That's been a huge discussion for us for a long time. Is that the optics? Again, we're dealing with optics like crazy these days, but the public is going to see, us respond and then have to re-respond. That doesn't look very professional. So why not show up right away? Yes, Dave.
Here I am. Okay, so for our viewers, can we just slip back to the question that Mr. Vanderfeist put on the table as what do we think we need on scene? Me personally, honestly, I don't know if is it based on your department size? Obviously, it's going to play into it, as Mark Schmidt alluded to. But for someone who's just not 100% sure, is their department currently doing the right thing? Does the department even know where we should be right now? Mark, I don't know if you could, maybe you're trying to lead into a question and you had an answer or some guidance. What do you have for our viewers that might be thinking what I'm thinking? Are we really doing the right thing?
I guess what I want to lay down here is the more hands we have available to be used initially is going to help us greatly with the stopwatch being stopped and time not being actually being our friend. So I'll give you an example. In that study from NIST back in 2013, with the initial attack line being advanced, so the fires on the 10th floor is a situation. That's the example given with this experiment. Fire in 10th floor, they have a 2.5-inch hand line being stretched and hooked up to the standpipes and being advanced to do fire attack. The results come from that in terms of with a 3-person crew. So only 3 firefighters doing that initial advance of the attack line. It took them 1 minute and 43 seconds longer than a 4-person crew. So in our reality, we have to look at what do we play with. We play with a lot of times 3-person crew, 4-person crews, maybe the odd time 5, but definitely we're not playing with 6-man crews. I don't think for the most part in our neck of the woods as far as our country of Canada. So in a 3-person crew versus a 4-person crew, took them 1 minute and 43 seconds longer than the 4-man crew. That's 103 seconds of time that is now going against us to get that initial attack line hooked up, advance, and get that water in where it's got to be. Now you may think, okay, it's not a big deal. 103 seconds, 1 minute, 43 seconds is not that long. Well, if we stop the podcast right now and we started counting 103, how long that's going to take? It's a long time. And it's a long time, not just for us to sit here and count the time, but think of the person who needs our help in that apartment, in that space. They're waiting 103 seconds now because we only have 3 sets of hands as opposed to 4 sets of hands to get that initial line in position. And as some of us have heard from other individuals who have a lot more experience in this, and I'll give one reference here, and that is with Battalion Chief Kurt Isaacson, his saying of water creates and maintains defendable spaces. We got to get that water in position and that water hitting the target ASAP because it does create that defendable space. It maintains it so that we can then do our job of getting that person out safely, hopefully saving their life. But by putting the fire out, in the end, the problem goes away. So that 3-person crew versus a 4-person crew, that 103 seconds is a precious amount of time that needs to be used wisely with the initial crews that are arriving on scene to get that water and that line, that baseball bat, in position to do the job has to get done. Because if it doesn't get done right, as you've heard, I think, from all of us here speaking today, we don't get a do-over. We don't get the chance to stop, delay a game, go back and change things and come back and carry on, or timeout. Things keep evolving. And the fire ground is very dynamic. And with that dynamic fire ground, it changes, and it changes for the worse, because fire wants to grow and wants to get bigger and destroy and start eating up the fuel available within its environment. And so we need to put that stop right away. And that's going to be involving, we'll talk later on about equipment, but it's going to involve hands, manpower being available to utilize the equipment that's there to stop the clock, use the time wisely, and to get that water in that line of position. So 103 seconds is not a lot of time, but between adding one more person on that initial assignment or the initial team to go up from the ground floor to the 10th floor, the 5th floor, makes a world of difference in terms of what we're going to have for an outcome. And as Mike will sometimes say, are we winning or are we losing? And with a 4-person team, we're going to win. With a 3-person team, we will win, but it'll take a bit of time to get there eventually in the long run.
Okay. And there are, again, that's the recommendations that we've saw with Kurt Isaacson and Dave McGrail and even McCormick from New York. Their recommendations are pretty, let's just say they're the top end of the scale, we'll just say. Whereas we're struggling to do that right now. And so there's also recommendations coming out of NIST, and we can talk a bit about that if you want, Mark, on a bit more on, or even Brent. I know, Brent, you've been following NIST and the NFPA on what our recommendations are for staffing.
Yeah, we actually have a presentation on it that we've given to the union, we've given to management, and we're sharing it. And again, it's stats and statistics. It's the science. When we're talking about staffing levels, to unload the groceries out of your car, it's just yourself. It's going to take time. You get your kids, you get your wife involved. It happens very rapidly, and I'm not as exhausted. I'm not as tired. Now, taking groceries is way different than firefighting, but we always have to do 2-story stair climb minimum every time we have a high-rise fire. With all that gear, it's absolutely tiresome. The more firefighters we have carrying gear, bringing equipment in, setting that stage, it's going to be better for the taxpayer and better for us having a better chance of putting the fire out quicker. So like you guys are all saying, more hands make quick work. But with all the studies, it backs it up and proves it. And knowing what you know now, we all have to change. If we didn't know that, it's just ignorance, I guess. But it's like getting pulled over for speeding. If you didn't know it was an 80, you're still going to get that ticket. Now that you know that the speed zone's an 80, you shouldn't be caught speeding there again. So things are starting to happen quick, I think, for us. Thank you.
Mark Schmidt, pretty much similar.
Yeah, I think you guys are making bounds compared to us. We've kind of stalled a little bit. We've had a lot of change in our management level above the shift, if you will, the assistant chiefs and the chief level. So we've kind of stalled a little bit. Some of our committees, obviously, with the pandemic that we're in right now, have kind of slowed things down. But we're still taking an 1 3/4 up. We've moved to a smooth bore nozzle on it. Is it great? No, but it's a step in the right direction. And the push is to still get to, kind of where you guys are starting to make some real gains in, try to get to that same spot.
Very good. Again, coming back to, there are some jobs that have to be done right away. And just for the staffing recommendations that I see, yes, we need an attack crew. We also need people to search those. To me, that's the 2 important things that have to happen. And that takes at least, as far as I'm concerned, 3 for the attack, and need at least 2 more per stairwell. If there's 2 stairwells, that's 4. So that's 7 right away. And then elevator. Are you taking elevator control? What's the norm for elevator control? 5 floors above? Mark?
It is for us.
Yeah. Is that pretty much the same for everybody? Yes?
It's going to vary. I mean, I think it
It's for
varies.
Ontario.
Okay. Again, once it becomes a 5-story walk-up, it becomes a little bit more difficult with our staffing then. All right.
Yeah, and not to sound complicated, but we just changed ours to 40 feet as well, because we have these large rotundas that are 4 stories or sometimes 5 stories. So we may actually be taking the elevator up to what we think is the 2nd floor. It's really the 5th floor because of these large rotundas. So we changed it to 40 feet. So if it's at 50 feet, you get to take the elevator.
But then that loses one member, all right, for elevator control. And so now there's another staff you're going to lose. Does everybody concur with that? There's your numbers are falling pretty quick, all right, as tasks get done. And then that comes back to Mark Vanderfeist with the 8-man crew. You know, it can go pretty quick.
Yeah, go very quick. It's like, you know, sucking the air out of a balloon. It's going to be gone within a matter of seconds, those available hands. And so one of the questions we have to, again, ask ourselves as a group is, so what are the options? What are our options as far as adding more hands, adding more manpower bodies to help us fulfill these functions and different assignments? And, you know, in a large, big city, we have other trucks to call upon that can be your 2nd, 3rd, and 4th alarm assignments coming in to help augment the situation. But in the smaller cities like the Miltons and the small ones kind of like it, you know, what are the options that we have to play with? We can't just tell the fire, you know, hold on a second, slow down a bit while we kind of get, you know, some people arriving here, which may take 10 minutes, but, you know, we'll get here. We have to get bodies coming now. And I guess this might be a bit of a small rant, but I don't understand why departments that are small nature are so opposed to calling in for mutual aid right away when we have a call, like say a high rise or a standpipe building that needs to be dealt with in a fire setting. And the option of either we call mutual aid and our own personnel who are maybe off duty at the same time is going to at least guarantee bodies coming to the scene, as opposed to what we'll call off-duty personnel first, and then if it's not enough, then we'll call for mutual aid at that point in time, which will be way too late. And if you want to get that baseball bat mentality, it's got to include breaking down the barriers, or the walls rather, of opposition in terms of bodies are bodies, and whether they wear a helmet that says so-and-so volunteer department or so-and-so part-time department or so-and-so full-time department, doesn't matter. It's a body. And that body can be utilized in many ways as far as the fire ground, like we've heard just now, lobby control, elevator control, there's outside functions, inside functions, but it's a body. And that body will help in the long run as far as stacking them up in terms of useful manpower to help take care of the problem, help staff those functions. And so the options are going to be different based on different communities and sizes and departments and their sizes as far as what's available to them. But that's where the departments look and say, okay, what options are available for us? Okay. And if my options are, I have off-duty personnel and mutual aid, or it's only mutual aid, then I got to use that option and use it all the time, not just say, well, it's there. If I do, you know, it has to be exercised and used every time. Just like the big city, when they have a big call, like in the Toronto area, they're going to have right away a 2nd, 3rd, 4th alarm being called in. It's not a, well, think about it. It's an automatic response based on procedure and policy. And that same mentality must be, I guess, passed down to the smaller departments that have limited resources and limited options. And the only options might be manpower. Now, I'm going to draw upon my experience from down there in Cranberry with Dave Mack, where they have a vast amount of mutual aid available around them. When they get a call of a certain nature, there's lots of mutual aid coming in from all parts of direction to give a helping hand for bodies. And it's pretty amazing when you make that call for mutual aid, and I'm sure Dave can attest to it, that those bodies do come, and they come in a fairly decent time frame, all hours of the day and night as well. And now, Dave, maybe you can concur with that or change that, but with that viewpoint there, or add to it.
So again, the new process we have in place has really helped us getting a lot of people on the first alarm to a scene in a good time. Again, going back to the vehicles everybody was saying was coming in, we're rolling 2 engines. We know we have 2 other aerials coming, a couple more engines. Again, it's up to 7 fire companies are getting simultaneously dispatched. It's made a difference. It really has. And
just to clarify, Dave, you don't have maybe so much vertical, but you've got a lot of spread out.
so yeah, we don't have the vertical. We have the horizontal.
Correct.
High rise. We have a lot of big warehouses now in the first due. We also have a lot of big office buildings. They may not be really tall, but Westinghouse headquarters, it's 3 buildings interconnected with a joint basement.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be a very bad situation.
Mm-hmm.
And high occupancy, especially during the day. Well, actually, they're 24/7.
There you go. Mm-hmm. Well, that's the point. As when we talk about standpipes, it's not just vertical. We're talking about floor as well. And standpipe's a standpipe to standpipe. We've got black pipe going either vertically or horizontally. Very good. Yes, options is calling in. I know that the most municipalities, and I think everybody here is going to be in the same boat other than ourselves in Toronto, where you're going to be calling off-duty staff in for overtime. And that's how it is mandated, I think, right now for most of you. Is that not correct? Matt Bacca?
It's an intermix right now. So the platoon chief that has the option to request mutual aid from outside agencies, but our typical response, if trucks are being eaten up, they will send like an emergency callback blast. It really comes down to the decision from the commander that day, right? Whether they're utilizing all our staff in mutual aid. Usually anytime mutual aid is activated, we do an automatic callback.
Very good. Okay. Robbie?
Yeah, we're very similar, emergency callback. Where I was going to actually ask Dave Mack the question. Where I was, we had a large fire where we were mutual aid, and it was tall office building, heavy fuel load, but there was not, to my knowledge, any interdepartmental training as far as what was expected on mutual aid, what roles and responsibilities those incoming crews would have. So what do you guys do down there as far as if we were to utilize an outside agency that was, like Mark Vanderfy said, professional is a professional, whether they're volunteer or career, it's their actions, right? So if a professional crew of volunteers show up, what roles and responsibilities are you assigning to them, and how are you facilitating that training to getting them into a high-rise situation where they might not have any experience to it?
So that's part of the whole package we put together. Everybody's got the same playbook. First due engine, second engine in, first truck in, second truck in, the follow-up third and fourth engines. You get your assignment. If you're first due engine, you know what you have to do. If you're second due, you're backup. If you're the first due truck, each company, like I said, we have the same playbook. All 5 host agencies, 8 fire companies, plus the 2 out of county, have the same book. And we train at least a couple times a year. We do mutual aid training. And actually do, again, it's a burn building, but again, we do live fire training. We try to get as many people to show up and run through the books. We practice inside the department and then together. But again, we're trying to stay with, everybody's doing it the same way. Where before it depended on who the chief was.
Gotcha.
On what their tactics were. So that's how we manage that everybody kind of knows what they're doing, is that we're all following the same playbook.
Matty, Worley, this is probably what we're doing here. This podcast webinar. Do you agree? Is that we're trying to get on the same page?
This is exactly it, Mike. This is the best we had in lieu of what's going on right now. Unfortunately, we had to postpone the Canadian High Rise Conference this year, where we had an opportunity last year to do a lot of this hands-on. We had the opportunity to get people from all across Ontario in the same room to talk about these sort of challenges they were having. Staffing, operations, equipment. We could throw a whole bunch of guys in the room. We could talk about all this stuff. So this is exactly the forum that we're just trying to get going here. There's some really good discussion on some great guys from right across the province and beyond, Dave Mack, to really help us get on the same page, right? Like Dave Mack, they literally have a book. We need to have a book, right? Ontario needs to have that book where we can all be on the same page. So if I need help, I can call on a neighbor and vice versa, and we're working out of that same.
Essentially, we do that, and we do talk a lot about it when we teach RIT, because in smaller departments, if you get a RIT situation, a Mayday, you do call in everybody that you can, because you're not going to be able to do it without that. So I don't know whether we can get that option into developing more of a plan for the smaller cities, and understanding how Matt Back operates. He is kind of surrounded by other career departments that are reciprocal with their mutual aid, and it's not a bad situation where Matt's from. However, where Mark's from, Vanderfeist, not sure how that works there. Or you don't have anything resources wise other than paid part-time. Is that not true?
For us, no, the only options we have are going to be off-duty personnel, and last resort would be mutual aid. It would be your volunteer type departments. Yeah, and that's why I in the beginning mentioned that it doesn't matter what your helmet says on the front. A body is a body, and everybody's needed to assist in some way. Now, the key component there, I think, has been mentioned. There has to be a playbook. There has to be that standardized approach that's familiar with all players involved. It can't just be a complete stranger showing up and all of a sudden, now what do I do? It's my first time being introduced to anything high-rise or standpipe-wise in that manner. So there must be some kind of training done ahead of time, familiarization, joint training. And I guess, again, the walls of opposition, the barriers must come down as far as the viewpoint of, well, we're only full-time, we don't play as volunteer firefighters. Yeah, that wall's got to come down because they're needed. And I think the greatest example of that we can all draw upon was September 11th, 2001, when New York City, the biggest department in North America, were staffed and were aided by volunteer fire departments during that time. So if they can use and needed to have the help from those kind of departments, I believe we as well in our neck of the woods also need the same help when it comes time for, in this case, standpipe or any kind of high-rise situation. And the best thing I think about this option is that if we were to exercise it and use all resources available, as far as our off-duty personnel and the mutual aid option, great. We got lots of bodies coming in. Well, if they don't need them, no big deal. They just get sent back home. But at least they were there when we made the call, and they came in a very expeditious time frame, as opposed to we realize, oh, we do need more bodies, and now it's too late to make the call because the fire has the upper hand at this point in time, and you're making more of a reactive call to get more manpower than being proactive and getting manpower to you. So that's why I say the walls must come down. And it doesn't matter where we are in Ontario or the country of Canada, that wall exists, it seems, up this way in terms of the looking down upon of the use of volunteer departments in a full-time setting.
Yeah. As you can see, Brent's brought up a worksheet of what a response would look like.
Yeah, just looking at, I'm just looking at like Mark's situation here. If these are all the positions that need to be filled for a high-rise fire, and he's getting 8 to 12. I'm not a math expert, but he's well short. If he calls mutual aid, can he fill all those positions that could be needed?
So let's tell you right now, Brent, if every guy working for our department was responding to that high-rise call, we can meet that by 5 people.
Wow.
All 48 guys could arrive on scene. If they were all working that day, we'd be over by 5.
Wow.
Right. So that's where looking at, what are the options we have to play with? Well, the options also include not just manpower, but also the options include what of that list can we exclude based on only 8 people available? What needs to be like prioritized as a priority and kept to be met, as opposed to everything else that's listed that's okay, that's secondary, that's not really going to be a priority, so we'll cut it out and worry about it later. But for the initial actions, the initial 10, 15, 20 minutes, these 3 things have to be done with only 8 bodies, and that's it. That's also part of the what are the options question that has to be answered and asked.
Very good.
If you break it down to brass tacks, water on the fire and search, there we go. Everything else to me is secondary.
And that's what I would argue too, Mike. I would argue the fact that look at your fireground priorities in ICS, which is 3 of them, fire, life safety, instant stabilization, property conservation. Of the 3, life safety takes top priority. So of the life safety priorities, what does that include? Water, rescue.
Correct.
Those are your 2 main functions. Everything else is now at that point secondary, and it can be completed later with additional bodies coming in as the scene unfolds at that point.
That's very true. Essentially, though, all these points here on this worksheet, once it gets to the that 100-year fire, yeah, we best have people in each one of those positions because they are needed above and beyond the fire attack and the search. And just through experience with those big fires, that's how it's been. So now here's a point that I put on the bullets for discussion on this for the hard ones. We did have a high-rise fire ops 101. It really didn't go the way I thought it was going to go. It should have went more of where the politicians were actually in the positions that we are in. We've done that with residential fires, and it worked very, very well. All right. It opened up the eyes to the people that sign our checks and set up the authority having jurisdiction. It worked very well. Now, in a high-rise situation, you can see how they could see how difficult it is and how the staff has to be what it is in order to. Do you guys agree, or is there a possibility to that?
I would say, yeah, that's a good idea. And I kind of was distracted there when you're talking for a bit, Mike. You're talking about the Ops 101, including not just fire people, but also outside fire people.
Correct.
That would have, an indoctrination into the high-rise world, or have their eyes opened in terms of what it's going to take to fight a high-rise or a standpipe equipped building kind of fire. And I would say certainly that's the best approach for us, which involves, it's like joint training, right? So if we have a Ops 101 for a municipality, but gear it towards the high-rise and standpipe kind of situations, if we're bringing in the outside departments, our volunteer departments, our part-time departments, the neighboring departments, or even bring in the stakeholders that are influential in making decisions for our department to take part in that as well. Make them the occupant. Hey, this is your unit. This is where you live. And you're going to sit there in this chair and watch us do this situation, but we're coming to get you out. And here's a stopwatch. You just start keeping track of time, how long it takes by the time you call 911 to us getting a line in and actually getting you out of the building, it may open their eyes as to, if this was really a real fire situation, how handicapped this department might be. And to help remove the handicap of that department, it may be a matter of opening up a door in terms of, well, maybe we can add another firefighter to the mix in terms of upstaffing, with hiring, or with or including into the whole fold. So I think it's a good idea that it can be done. And certainly it's not just a publicity stunt. It also lends into the training aspect as well, because you are going through the motions of arriving on scene and grabbing the needed equipment and getting up to that staging floor, and then going up to your next floor and unpacking your hose loads and doing your recon and whatnot. So you're not just staging something for cameras to capture the mayor or politicians, but you are actually going through what takes place for yourself. And every time you can do that, it's a good opportunity for a firefighter to become more efficient and effective with their skill sets, and to develop that mastery of skill in the long run for the most part.
I think you're right, Mark. That's what it comes down to. Training, drill, over and over again till we've all got it.
I can't speak to my current department very much. I draw most of my stuff off of my former department, just timelines. But with the CHC being canceled due to COVID, I know where I am now is really progressive, and they had some top individuals going to that to seek this knowledge and basically get on the forefront of this. Because after last year's, when we had 18 different departments in the stairwell and we're running a simple evolution, every single person's eyes popped open and they're like, I don't have buildings like this, but my neighbor does. And that was, I think, kind of the eye opener for a lot of those smaller departments that came.
Yeah. So that's right back to Dave Mack and the playbook, right? That everybody in the county works out of that same playbook.
Yeah.
I'm good. No, I agree on the challenges. I
Everybody's
think
good.
that day we met with Brass, he brought it up to our attention there with the Hogtowns meeting, is that the one advantage the United States does have in firefighting is being so old, they've developed playbooks over time. And I mean, he talked about FDNY and all these departments, and that every guy from the day they're hired to wherever they're deployed, they have playbooks for their area. They have playbooks for everything. And I think that's something that across the board, I'm sure everybody struggles with, is the time to pre-plan everything properly and develop a playbook. I know one of our challenges, and it's a lot for the guys in the areas, but probably similar across the board, is we have problems with vehicle positioning and vehicle placement, that we have high rises in places where trucks can't enter just because of the time they were built, or where accessing standpipes is in a unique location. So even from stretching to a truck into the standpipe connection can be quite challenging. So having new people come on and catching them up, having the playbook could be advantageous versus just having to go out all the time and pre-plan with them.
Yes.
That comes down to that DOSE acronym that I think where Schmitty operates from. That O being obstacles, right? And not just on the fire floor, from truck to hookup, fences, cars, weird courtyards, all those, right? And pre-planning, and I think that's, again, the advantage of the smaller, medium-sized department, where we might not have the hands on scene, but we have the ability to pre-plan and kind of be masters of our district and be that neighborhood kind of fire truck and know our area and know those, blah, blah, blah building. Yeah, you can let that second in truck know FDC connections are over here. You got a goofy access, and everybody's going to have a lot better time making that hookup.
Well, you know what, Mike, it's we've been here for an hour and a half so far, just talking on our first point. So we made some good progress on the discussion on staffing and information about the staffing function and so on. I think it might be a good time for us to maybe park this here for us for tonight, and have some questions answered that may be out there. But then I think have us come back next time and look at our second point of what can we change as far as our equipment and what we're using now, what's recommended, and so on and so forth. And to come back for a third time and look at our third point, which is what things have to change. And that dives into a whole different world at that point in time. So are there any questions that have come in from anybody anybody got from, I don't know, text messages or other social media means?
Nothing here.
Nothing here. We're good here.
No, sir.
Okay.
Mhm. Okay, so thank you very much, Mark, for keeping us on track, and I appreciate all your input, and I think everybody else will. Be prepared. There's going to be pushback from people. We know that, but I think we've been around long enough that we know how to address that. We aren't getting angry. We just say, well, we know the numbers, we know the science, and we know that we can do this. It's just a matter of it's not impossible. All right. I guess that's the biggest thing we could take away from this, and hopefully we can get everybody else to believe in that. Any parting words?
Keep training. Stay safe.
Nice.
Well, I want to thank everybody for your time tonight. It's been much appreciated. And for all those out there who are watching this, thank you for your time watching. Any questions you have in regards to this, by all means, get a hold of myself or Mike Langford, any one of us. You can get a hold of us through our social media, Facebook, or through email. And we're more than glad to take your time to answer questions, share information, and try and help out in the fight with your pandemic, as far as getting things going in the right direction for high-rise or standpipe equipped building responses. So thank you again, and hopefully we'll see you guys and everybody else in our next time together to look at what we are able to change in this fight against high-rise fires and standpipe buildings.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you,
See
everybody.
you, everybody.